The new principles and purposes should guide us in the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith. They should ask us to choose love in action as the path forward. Words from the charge to the Article 2 Study Commission. The purpose of the Unitarian Universalist Association is to actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. A statement from the proposed Article 2 Purposes and Covenant of the Unitarian Universalist Association's bylaws and rules. The subject of this morning's sermon is a proposed revision to the Unitarian Universalist Association's bylaws. I suppose by now that means that you've realized you've wandered into the correct congregation this morning. We're not talking about Jesus. We're not discussing the weekly Torah portion or offering a Dharma talk or a Hindu sermon. We're engaging in that most beloved of practices, a discourse about bylaws. Bylaws, it is unique amongst the world's religions that the Unitarian Universalist Association chooses to place its primary statement of values in our bylaws. No other tradition does this. Scriptures, yes. An ancient creed, yes. Foundational mythology, yes. Millennia-old oral tradition, yes. But bylaws, not so much. Bylaws are an unabashedly human creation. There is no pretense within them that our theology is anything other than the product of earthly bodies. There's no sense that Moses came from the mountain with 2 tablets of bylaws for us. Or that the prophet of Islam received a visit from the angel Gabriel in the cave of Hira that gave him the eternal bylaws for all time. Instead, we Unitarian Universalists understand theology to be a human creation, something that we craft from our encounters with that which is greater than all, yet resides within each. We then attempt to express something of that in our own insufficient language in human words. Theology is a human creation, words, language, the insufficiency of any mortal effort. We Unitarian Universalists attempt to distill the rich disagreements amongst us. After all, sitting in the pews or watching online, we have Christians, Buddhists, neo-pagans, theists, humanists, Muslims, Hindus, practitioners of Ifa, and, well, I don't know what else. We attempt to distill all of this theology into a set of common beliefs, common principles. Our most recent effort to do so came as a religious movement from the merger of the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America in 1961. They came together to form a new religious association, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and when they did, they articulated 6 principles of a free faith. The delegates at the founding of the Unitarian Universalist Association were wise enough to recognize that these 6 principles were not meant to stand for all time. They understood them to be but the latest in an ongoing effort to articulate the things most commonly believed among us. This is an effort that stretched back centuries, and so when they crafted the 6 principles of a free faith, they mandated that Article 2 of the bylaws, the place in the corporate text where the principles reside, be reviewed every 15 years. In 1984, this resulted in a comprehensive revision that gave us the current 7 principles and 6 sources. I anticipate that most of you are familiar with them. If you're a visitor, you probably encountered them when you searched for the words Unitarian Universalist, because they pop up near the top of any Google search about our tradition. If you're a longtime member, you've probably seen them on bookmarks in the past, heard sermons about them, or encountered them as you've been paging through the gray hymnal, because that morning's sermon was not all that great. In 2018, the General Assembly of the Association began the process of again reviewing the principles and sources. As a result of the review in 2020, the General Assembly decided that it was time to consider a comprehensive revision. So the Article 2 Study Commission was launched, and after a process which gathered feedback from more than 11,000 Unitarian Universalists, the Commission proposed new language for the bylaws. It includes the substitution of values for principles, the summarization of each of these values into a single word: love, justice, interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, and generosity. The removal of specific sources for that which grounds us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times, and the assertion of the centrality of love within our tradition. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love, reads one section. The purpose of the Unitarian Universalist Association is to actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love, reiterates another. Congregational freedom and the individual's right to conscience are central to our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of union, so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed. That's how the association's famous Liberty clause is being rephrased. No particular creed, liberating love, this habit of ours in which we democratically decide how to state our highest values and aspirations, is one of the central practices of Unitarian Universalism. This year, we're living into it as a religious association, devoting a year of study to the proposed set of new text of Article 2. In our congregation, that means that today and next Sunday, after the second service, we'll be holding forums for those who want to discuss the revisions to the text. Are there things about it that you think can be improved? We still have the opportunity to amend it if by February 1st, 15 congregations agree upon a proposed amendment. Then the General Assembly will consider incorporating revisions into the new text of Article 2 this June when it meets online. On November 15th, our board will consider endorsing amendments from any member of the congregation who wishes to present one. And so if you have ideas of what you would like to see changed in the revised text, please send them to Board President Ron Cookston, who's here this morning, no later than November 13th, so that it can be placed on the board agenda. Our board intends to share any amendments that it endorses with other congregations so that we might organize 14 more to join with us in making proposals that will be considered by the General Assembly. The Assembly will vote on whether or not to endorse the revised text at its June meeting, and at that point it will need to get 2/3 of the delegates to vote to make it pass. Delegates are apportioned by congregational size. We get 6 or 7 of them, and again, if you would like to be a delegate this year, you should see Ron or Board Vice President, who's in the back there, Cheryl Abrahams. Liberating love. This habit of ours in which we democratically decide how to state our highest values and aspirations is, like I said earlier, a central Unitarian Universalist practice. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to wrestle with how we each articulate what is most meaningful in our life together. Over the years, though, it's also made Unitarian Universalists the butt of a number of jokes, some of which we tell each other, and some of which people tell about us. You might have heard the one, for instance, about the Unitarian Universalist congregation that always stopped singing dead in the middle of their hymns. They had to have a vote on whether to proceed based on whether they agreed with the words or not. Maybe not so funny, so let's try another. A Unitarian Universalist tries to explain the tradition to a new friend. The friend asks, "What do you mean Unitarian Universalism is a creedless religion? That means you don't believe anything, right?" No, that's not what it means, you explain to your friend. "So what do you believe then?" the friend queries. "Well, for one thing, we believe in creedless religion." Here's another one. What's the greatest sin you can commit in a Unitarian Universalist congregation? A discussion group where everyone agrees. Or then there's this classic. How many Unitarian Universalists does it take to change a light bulb? At least 3, because you have to hold a vote in which the majority wins. My favorite, though, might be the old standby, "Yea, though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I shall fear no evil, for evil and good are but human constructs." Evil and good are but human constructs. I have mixed feelings about the proposed changes to Article 2. The values are wordier than the principles, and I dislike the substitution of 6 sources for a more general claim that the religious ancestries we inherit and the diversity which enriches our faith calls us to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. But love in action and liberating love, these are some things with some real theological depth to them. Evil and good might be human constructs, but love is not. If you're some variety of a theist, you likely believe God is love and that love your fellow as yourself is the primary religious injunction. But we need not look to divine reality to assert that love exists beyond human construction. In the last decades, numerous varieties of biological science have found a physiological basis for love within the human brain. Love beyond belief. The contemporary Unitarian Universalist theologian Tendeka has done extensive work on how the biological reality of love provides the real ground of moral values and religious belief. She's argued that it provides a universal foundation which different religious traditions then state in their own way. For Buddhists, it might be sunyata. For pagans, Gaia. For humanists, the infinite, uncreated universe, she claims. Love and action, liberating love. In the last weeks, as I've been considering the proposed revisions to Article 2, I found myself focusing on what sort of theological resources these statements might provide. And my reflections have drawn me to 3 things in particular. A line from my favorite novel by Fyodor Dostoevsky, Brothers Karamazov, an old family story, and a verse from the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. First, Dostoevsky's line, "Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in dreams." Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in dreams. Second, the family story. It involves my grandfather Maury, my great-aunt Claire, my great-grandfather Francis, or grandmother Francis, and my great-grandfather Nathan. My great-aunt Claire is the only one of the 4 who I ever really knew, and so the story comes from my father, who I imagine will correct me after the service if I get any of the important details wrong. Claire, Maury, Francis, and Nathan, they were Ukrainian Jews. For many generations, their family had lived in a community named near Bela Tserkov, a city in Ukraine that was later the site of one of the worst massacres of the Holocaust. They left Ukraine well before then. When the Tsarist government fell, Ukraine was plunged into a civil war. With it came a new round of pogroms, organized massacres about killing Jews. These were so fierce and so frequent that one rabbi described the experience as always knowing that death awaits us, horrible death by sword and fire. Now, my ancestors decided to flee and make the long trek from their village in Ukraine to the French port of Marseille, where they could board a ship to the United States. The distance is over 1,600 miles. They walked most of the way. My grandfather was maybe 2 or 3 at the time. His sister was about 3 years older. Imagine that, traveling 1,600 miles, primarily on foot, though I think there was some time on a train and in a horse cart, with 2 preschool-aged children. But that's not really the story. The story is that they almost didn't make it. Someplace outside of Belotserka, on their way out of Ukraine, they were cornered by a group of Cossacks. Some writer, I think it was the Ukrainian Jew Isaac Babel, once described the Cossacks as the traditional enemies of the Jews. Historically, they were a semi-nomadic community connected to Christianity that moved through Ukraine and southern Russia on horseback. The Tsar used them as cavalry, and they had a variety of special privileges under the Tsarist regime. One of these, apparently, was the ability to conduct pogroms in the name of collecting tribute with impunity. So a group of Cossacks surrounded my ancestors. They forced my great-grandfather, Nathan, onto the back of a cart, and they were about to take him off to kill him. My grandfather, Maury, who was, again, only 2 or 3 at this time, started to scream. Now, I'm not sure he fully knew what was going on, but he knew it was bad, and he did not want to be separated from his father. His cries moved the leader of the Cossacks. He took my great-grandfather off of the cart, and he sent my ancestors along the way. Eventually, they made it to Marseille, and from there to the windy city of Chicago. Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in dreams. That familial origin story can be read as a story about the power of liberating love. The love of my grandfather for his father moved him to terror at the prospect of losing him. The power of love stirred something like empathy or compassion within the leader of the Cossacks. We'll never know why he spared my ancestors. Perhaps he had children of his own and saw within the tears of my grandfather the tears of his own children. I do not know. But what I do know is this: whatever happened in that moment, in that interaction, was rooted in the liberating power of love. We speak of liberating love. We're not talking about some easy trope or casual nicety, some Hallmark card greeting. We're uplifting something that, through its ability to unleash compassion, has great power to save human lives and transform our world. Article 2 does not tell us how we are to transform the world through liberating love. It just enjoins us that that is the work that we are putting before ourselves. That is the work of our faith. Tears, compassion, liberating love. There are theologians who might point to us towards how we can unleash love as a force for liberation. The martyred Salvadorian Archbishop Oscar Romero was one. He said, "There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried." Unitarian Universalist theologians Rebecca Parker and Forrest Church are others. Church claimed that the core of our Universalist theology was to love your enemies as yourself, to see your tears in another's eyes, and to respect, even embrace otherness, rather than to merely tolerate it. Parker, meanwhile, writes, "There is no holiness to be ascertained apart from the holiness that can be glimpsed in another's eyes." Another's eyes. The liberating power of love is found with the power of empathy. The ability to imagine yourself in another's shoes is unleashed. And it's here with the horrors of the present hour that I recall a stanza from the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. He was for many years regarded as Palestine's national poet, though he died here in Houston. An opponent of Hamas, a believer in reconciliation between Arabs and Jews, he once described Hebrew as a language of love, and he wrote a long poem during the Second Intifada titled "A State of Siege." One stanza within it carries much weight. To a killer, if you'd contemplated the victim's face and thought, you would have remembered your mother in the gas chamber. You would have liberated yourself from the rifle's wisdom and changed your mind. This is not how identity is reclaimed. You would have liberated yourself. I'm not going to pretend that I have the answers to the widely reported war in the Middle East, nor am I prepared to offer solutions to the wars in Ukraine, Cameroon, or the Sudan. They are complicated questions that so many struggle to answer. But what I know is this: whatever hope there is for peace, if there is hope for peace, comes from liberating love. Liberating love is not platitudes or simple statements of intent. It stems from the possibility of, as Parker would have, experiencing the holiness that can be glimpsed in one another's eyes. The holiness in one another's eyes. The power of liberating love. The task we would set for ourselves if we take as our association's purpose the transformation of the world through liberating love is a great one. It is unlikely that such a task is achievable. Our highest aspirations rarely are. So I'm going to leave my sermon there. It does not have a resolution. The wars go on. We Unitarian Universalists continue to debate how to name our most profound principles within the context of our bylaws. We struggle with how such principles call us to live and how they would call us to act in a world where every day the news can break your heart. Liberating love, the lack of resolution. Having to complete the sermon somewhere, I complete it here unresolved with an invitation to hold close to the verses of our final hymn. What wondrous love is this, that brings my heart such bliss, and takes away the pain of my soul, of my soul. May we all live into liberating love. Amen, Ashe, Shalom, and blessed be.